Yes. Yes.
Printer.
Uh-oh.
Won't print off the computer. So-
She'll need it.
My
house. Yeah, same.
Yeah, our printer's a little challenging. It's like asking you to send into
One
my
of these
seat.
days, when that hits, and then we hear that, I'm just gonna say, that's why I'm not allowed in Vegas anymore.
You're good. Just wait for like if there's like an April 1st.
Yeah. Doesn't mean-
No, I did. Yeah.
CEO.
On a Thursday.
Who has- they
You have
stop.
numerous things that the boards that you
Yes,
set
and
up.
they're trash.
Monday night, like all different nights, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to look for next year when it falls.
Who's, yeah,
You can mark your calendar.
let's do that.
Officials, time for
Next May 1st is a
April
Monday.
1st.
Are we talking about
April,
the-
yeah, next April
The
1st.
ChatGPT guy?
Yeah,
He
that
he testified.
But we don't need it.
It scared me when I said
Did you-
time to do it now.
Did you read or are you aware of the open
Everything
letter?
on the agenda. be something.
There's an open letter from
What did he say?
Bill Gates, Paul Allen, who's the current
Don't do
president of
ours,
Apple,
because
Tim Cook.
Zipline installed.
Yeah, but it's like a
We could
lot of
take
really,
all
really
city
big,
staff
Water
and
bill.
populate the
I think,
audience with nothing but city staff. And
Eric
have them
Schmidt
read the
signed it
craziest,
as
weirdest
well,
points.
stating like full cease and desist on the AI development.
I heard
on
the best one
deploying
was
any AI bots.
All right, let's call this meeting to order.
Oh, that's funny. Was it serious? Oh.
We just put some robots on sailboats. Okay, let's call this meeting to order.
All right, would you like a roll call?
No, I'd like to state the name of the meeting and the
Oh.
date, and for the record, folks who are going to watch later. So this is the meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Harbor Springs, Michigan. It's Thursday, May 18th, 2023. Yes, Jeff, could we have a roll call?
Oh, good, I'm dying to do it. Nancy Rondell,
Here.
Barry Lustgarten,
Here.
Mark Day,
Yeah.
Bill Mulder,
Here.
George Pete,
Here.
Bob Thoma,
Here.
Emily Dubay,
Here.
Vanessa Warren,
Here.
Rick Tarczynski. It's not here. We have a quorum.
All right. First thing on the agenda is approval of minutes in the last two meetings. Have you had a chance to take a look at those?
I move to approve the April 20th meeting minutes.
I second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, say nay. All right, those minutes are approved. The other ones that we have are for Thursday, May 3rd, the special meeting.
I'll move that we approve the minutes of the May 3rd meeting.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the May 3rd special meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Minutes are approved. All right, next thing on the agenda is public comment, and this is where the public can comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda. It would be useful for us to know. I'm looking on Zoom and I don't see any attendees. Is that true, Victor?
That's
Other than us? Great. And members of the audience, anything that we should know? All right, thank you very much for coming out tonight, everybody. And all right, first thing on the regular agenda then is two things from Jeff. And he's going to give us his annual assessor's report and his zoning administrator's report. And he presented this to city council, maybe at the last meeting or the one before. And it was pretty interesting. And I thought we ought to be in sync with, you know, what he's seen in the last year, since it influences so many of the things that we work on. All right, Jeff, what do we need to know?
So this is an annual report that we do. There's no legal requirement, I don't believe, to do this, but it's just something that's been done since prior to me coming to the city of Harbor Springs to keep everybody informed what's going on, the work that the assessor does for the city, and the trends that we're seeing with the city. So some of it is some boilerplate information, just informing the community about various things that happened, you know, notifying everybody about what the taxable value consumer price index was for the year, which was 5%. That was set by Proposal A back in 1994, I believe, limiting the increase in taxable value on property each year. 5% is the highest we've had. It's statutorily capped at that. Without that cap, it would have been, I believe, 7.9%. So this is the first year that it really exceeded that. We saw about the same number of sales as we've seen in previous years. That seems to be fluctuating in and around 60 to 70 sales per year. But one of the first graphs on here shows the median sale price, which has dramatically risen in the last year here. The study that we had this year showed approximately a 20% increase in sales for the city of Harbor Springs. That was pretty typical with a lot of the other communities in the area seeing similar increases.
It was an increase in sales price.
That was right. So this Emmett County does a study each year. They look at 2 years worth of sales. They compare the sale price to the assessed value, where I'm supposed to be assessing property at 50% of value. That study shows, due to the market changes and whatnot, where we actually came in line with our assessment. We have to be at 50%. Some years we're at 48, showing that we have a little bit of an increase. Back in 2008 with the housing market crash, we had a few years where we were over 50 and we had to reduce assessments. This last study came in at 40.8%. So it showed significant increase in the sales compared to the assessed values, indicating that we had to raise the assessed values to keep track of that.
Is the commercial closer to 50 just because there were fewer commercial properties that were sold?
There are fewer. Also, I think that the commercial market has been a more stable market. We haven't seen the wild swings in commercial as compared to what we see in residential. We're at 49.17 for commercial. The state says that I have to stay between 49 and 50 is my ratio. So we really didn't have to make too many changes. Historically, that has trended and stayed closer to 50%. And I think we can also see that in another graph here later, where we see the trend in values changing.
Let's just absorb that median sales price for a minute. That
Right.
is a stunning number.
Compared to 2015, when I started working here, and the median sales price was about 250,000.
And that stayed stable
Yeah.
through 2019.
And that there was some slight increases to that, rising a little bit. But yes, from 2019 to 2022, there really was, it really started to change.
And this is the actual median, the price in the middle, not the average.
Correct. And the reason that I use the median as opposed to the average, we have a wide variety of sales in Harbor Springs. We will have some homes, a small single family, more affordable home would be down in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, but we have some large sales. We have sales of waterfront properties and other large home sales in the $2, $4, $8 million range. And when you have one sale that's that high and you add that to the mix, it can really skew that number beyond what happened, what we would really see. So that's why I felt that the median was a better number to show.
But even that, as a median,
Correct.
says something about the community, says a lot about our community.
I didn't do the math this year, but last year when I was looking at this, I think I remember telling you, Victor, 25% of all of the sales in Harbor Springs were over $1.25 million. So it's been changing dramatically. It shows that we have a strong base, but also it's just, something that's changing in the affordability of homes in the area. Which I think ties in with some of the things that we'll see in construction and the zoning report too, and a lot of the things that we've been talking about through the master plan with the number of homes available and affordability of homes and things like that. New construction, again, the number of permits has not really fluctuated too much from year to year. It's declined a little bit in the number. But we've seen a dramatic increase in the value of new construction that's being added to the roll. So projects are bigger. And that's been a trend that's been going on a little bit here for a while with the increasing. The we've got some numbers here for the DDA capture. This is again, not the actual revenue that they're collecting, but the taxable value that they're capturing that revenue on, just to clarify that. So they're gaining some growth. The last couple of pie charts are really just kind of indicating the percentage of the properties in the community where the value is located, where the percentage of parcels are. And we can see in Harbor Springs, we really just have two classes. We have residential and commercial. We don't have any industrial property in town. There's no agricultural property in town, really. We have
a question. What's developmental?
Developmental properties would be, let's say that there was, and it's really a class that the State Tax Commission and a lot of assessors were trying not to use anymore. The idea for that was, let's say that you have properties that are surrounded by one type of use, but they're a separate use. And the best example of this I can probably come up with is when you're coming into Traverse City and you start to come in, and there's all of the hotels that are along the water, and then maybe there's one residential house in between them. That residential house might be a good example of a developmental property. And the idea was when they do that study, that 2-year study, looking at the sales and what things are selling for, they do that by class. So they don't take commercial sales and compare that to residential or vice versa. But the idea there was, if you have something that's residential in use, but the sale that happens transitions it into another class like commercial, then the assessor would say, well, that's really kind of more of a developmental property, and try and catch those properties and estimate that next sale would change the use of the property. So that sale of that residential home that turned into commercial wouldn't be included in with the other residential sales to affect them.
And what's personal?
Personal property, residential property is exempt from personal property. Personal property would be machinery, fixtures, objects in the business that you use for the business. They for commercial and industrial properties, they do have to pay tax on that. So in the city of Harbor Springs, personal property would be like in our downtown businesses, restaurants are paying personal property tax for their ovens, their, the tables and chairs that are in that restaurant. Yeah. However, though, there is an exemption that most of our businesses qualify for, and getting this in a meeting is probably good because I think there are some businesses that don't apply for that exemption that could get it. If the value of the personal property is $80,000 or less, they can file an exemption, which exempts them and they don't have to pay property taxes on it. Some of the larger businesses might not qualify for that, but a lot of businesses do. Many of the businesses in Harbor Springs are already getting that exemption. There are a few more that probably could, but they do have to file a form, and there is a deadline for that at the beginning of the year.
So does the bookstore have to pay tax on the books?
Inventory, no, but the shelves that the books sit on is part of their
Yes.
business. So they would have to pay for something.
Why is
like
that? Why is that?
Because the state deems it so. It's just the laws that are written right now on the way that revenue is generated. They've said that personal property.
From being in business.
Well, if you look at other states, there are other states where residents have to pay personal property tax on their items in their home too. I think that like North Carolina, for instance, you have to pay a personal property tax on your vehicle. So,
Virginia.
yeah, different states are collecting the revenue differently, and I'm not one to say what's a good plan or a bad plan. That's just how it's currently working in Michigan right now. And with that personal property, it's part of the real property, the real estate, and it falls under the assessor's responsibility to work with property owners in documenting what that is. So there's a form that they file each year where they would report that value. I process that. Yeah, so it's really kind of a self-reporting thing. So.
Do the legislators do that before or after they give themselves a raise?
I'm not gonna,
go there.
yeah, that's beyond my, I have to regulate what we do, or not regulate, but enforce what, the rules that the state gives me and administrate that. And actually, we're gonna be getting some information a little bit later. We just went through our assessing audit. It used to be called the audit of minimum assessing requirements. That's done every 5 years. I think they have a new name for it now. We just went through that and we'll get the results for that here probably in 30 to 60 days or so would be my guess. So.
Jeff, I have just a question on a different, for a healthy city, if there is such a thing, what's the percentage of commercial to residential in general? I mean, obviously we're skewed, we're way one way. Is there a formula for that in terms of a city that's self-sustaining and, you know, is considered a healthy city? Is there anything out there like that?
You know, I don't know that there certainly isn't a standard to my knowledge that I'm aware of. And I think that would be very difficult to do because I think that there's a lot of things that each community can do to modify their process to make it healthier for themselves. I will say that one thing that we see is we are very reliant on the property taxes and the revenue that comes from residential property. That's, you know, what is it? 89% of our, you know, assessed and taxable value is in, you know, the residential class. So that's the bulk of where the tax revenue is coming from. But also then we've probably structured things appropriately to take that into consideration. It is a little bit more, there's more fluctuation there than in the commercial class that we can see. And we can really see that if you go to the last page, there's the assessed value trend by class and the taxable value trend by class. And we can clearly see in 2009, we had a rise in assessed and taxable value until that year. That's when we started to see the effect of the 2008 housing market crash. And we saw a dip in value there. And we saw, even though it's more pronounced in assessed value, we did see it a little bit in our taxable value. But I think a lot of communities, knowing where the bulk of their revenue is coming from, structure things appropriately. So the way that we are doing our operation here in Harbor Springs is going to differ greatly from, for instance, the city of Midland, where I think 80 or 90% of their revenue comes from personal property because of the companies that are there, like Dow Chemical is in Midland. Please don't quote me on the percentages. I'm just estimating, but I think it was a significantly high number like that.
It always makes me a little concerned when something, charts like that where the residential rises and the commercials are perfectly flat. I think we need to think about what that really means. I think it says some things we haven't ever really stopped to think about. But that's just fine.
Part of that also is just, I think, the percentage of properties. We don't have a comparatively high number of commercial
I'm sure that
properties.
enters into it.
And a lot of that is, I think, just the size of our community. We're only 1.2 square miles.
Right here, 187 commercial properties and
Right.
79 residential.
Right. So that's really the overall gist of assessing.
I have a follow-up question that comes from the results of this. Victor, do we have a sense yet what this means for the city's millage rate and tax revenue for next year?
No,
I guess there's a little bit of an answer, but it's not the whole answer. Part of the process is going through because there's the Headley amendment with the Headley rollback. And I believe with the high inflation, Nick just did his 4029 form, which goes to the county where we're telling them what millages we're going to use. And that millage reduction fraction for that.
2024?
No, for this year, for the
Summer.
summer and winter tax bills that will be coming out this year. He's done one. I don't know if he does another one in the winter for the winter bill. But I believe that the millage reduction fraction came out as just a straight one. So there's no reduction in that this year. And I guess I can't say
So I guess,
why.
I want to clarify what you mean by what it means for the village.
I was wondering about the millage rate and then, projections for tax
We
revenue.
don't have projections yet for what, well, obviously we did when we did the budgeting, we had projections in 2022 of what we estimated the
Okay,
percentage would
sure.
be. So that's how we budgeted. But as far as for 2024, we probably won't get that until later this summer, have a better idea of what we might be at. But a lot of it also depends, on that CPI, that rate, inflation rate,
Right.
and that affects it a lot too. well, not a lot, but it affects it some, so.
Okay, any questions on assessing and values and? It just seems like there's no end of demand. Yeah, some high prices already this year, just in things I know about.
And I thought the demand was due to the lack of inventory, and that doesn't seem the case, because you said it was pretty comparable.
Well, that certainly seemed to be the case in my discussions with realtors from, I think, more in 2020, 2021. I think that may be getting a little bit better, but I think it's still a factor. And I think we can see that in the last couple of years, we've had more vacant land sales with new homes being built than we have in previous years. I think it's still the case that it's probably a little bit more expensive to build a new home as opposed to finding a comparable and buying something existing. So I think that leans towards that there is still a lack of inventory compared to the people looking here, that we have got too much demand for the supply. So people are buying vacant lots and building something new.
Well, I think supply, I can sit here and I can think of 5 houses that are on the market for over $1 million, way over $1 million. But I can think of, off the top of my head, I can hardly think of anything that's 3 or 4. So, I mean, it tells you we've got supply at the very high end, but we don't have supply for, working class folks to move anywhere close by.
It's certainly a little bit more anecdotal than what I would put in a report, but I think it was 2019 when I was talking to a realtor, and the thought at the time was a move-in ready home priced $350,000 to $450,000. The average listing time was something like 3 days.
Yeah.
So things were moving very quickly.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you, Chad. And what about zoning?
Zoning, so zoning report, I don't have as much history, so I had some nice graphs in the assessing report that show a longer period of history where I was able to go back to 2020 or 2002. So we had a good 20 years worth of things to kind of show those trends. I've just started compiling this information for the zoning report, so there's less history. So good example is this first one. In 2020, we had just over 40 applications for zoning permits. And you can see this year for 2023, it's down to just over 20. So I don't know how that really ties in with the bigger picture. If 2020 was an unusual year where we had an unusual number, and 2023 is more typical, or if it's showing a trend in a reduction in the number of permits. But again, even though there's a reduction in the number, they're bigger projects where we saw that the value that we're adding to the assessment roll is larger. A lot of the other permits for smaller issues, warning letters that I send out, I've graphed on here, the number of variances granted by the ZBA, special land uses requests. I just kind of listed a few of the different things on here. I hope it's not too busy, but I thought it was good information to see. Most things I think seem to be kind of hanging out, not changing too much. There are a couple things that I want to point out. I hope everybody had an opportunity to read it. I won't go over the whole thing, but if anybody has any questions, please ask. One thing that's noted on here that I want to expand on a little bit is software. BS&A, which is the company that provides us with our assessing software and our tax software, also has zoning software for building permits, zoning permits, things like that. Another portion of that program is called the Community Development Module. And we will be updating our software with them for assessing a tax. And with that update, we're also adding on the module for zoning stuff. So I think we'll have better ability to track some of the zoning stuff that we do here. And I believe that a part of that software is we can put something on our website where somebody that has a concern or a complaint, they can hop on the website and put in the information, and that will trigger and send it to us. We can then look to see who needs to respond to that issue, whether it's myself or if it's a utility bill or whatever it might be. But then there's also a way that I believe that people can log back in and see what the status of their concern is. Whether we, look at it and say, well, this really isn't an issue that's a violation, or yes, this is a violation and we sent out a letter. Or, and follow the progress of that. I believe that we will be gaining that. We'll have to see. I'm not sure exactly how that works out, but it'll be a nice feature to have more software for zoning, because we really don't have much of anything right now.
Any questions on that for Jeff? All right, then why don't we move on to agenda item number 3, which is voting requirements. All right, Jeff, what do we need to know about that?
So it's come up a couple of times in previous meetings, the number of votes that are required to pass a motion at the planning commission. So I pulled up the language from our bylaws that talk about that. Specifically, to point out, for a regular motion, for just reviewing a site plan or approving some type of recommendation to city council, the way we currently have it is concurring vote of 5 members of the planning commission. So if there are 5 members present, that means it needs to be unanimous. If all 9 people are here, then it's a majority of the full board, is essentially the way it's written. For special land uses, or for some other types of special actions that we would take, that changes to 6 affirmative votes. So again, basically a 2/3 majority of the full board. And we had some issues where that seemed a little bit excessive. So we put together some ideas of what other communities do. The back page there has, I found one local community, City of Petoskey. And then I found a couple other ones that was just a quick internet search to see what popped up. But I think the typical ideas here is you can do majority of the full board, 2/3 majority of the full board, majority of members present, or 2/3 majority of members present seemed to be what I was finding in some other communities. So with that, you guys wanted some information, thought it would be a good idea to discuss. That's what I found. So if you have any thoughts, if you feel that needs to be changed, we could look at any of these ideas. We could change just special land uses, because that's where we seem to have the concern, or we could look at everything.
And to clarify, anything bylaws would have to also be approved by council. Correct.
Yes. So we would be, if we decide tonight that we want to make a change, or that a change would be a good idea, that would go to council.
Yes. We would take the discussion tonight, draft that up, make the change to the bylaws, set that for a discussion that would then go to council.
Okay, so to start our discussion, let's state what the problem is. That's always a good way before we talk about things. So who would like to take a run at stating what the problem is?
I think with Nancy, her example of, it seems like that was a problem, that she had to wait 2-3 months to get something approved because we couldn't really form a quorum to handle her needs. So if I can phrase it, is one of the issues we have generally is we have a large board for a small town, 9 people, and we have a lot of people who they're here full-time residents, but they're also gone a lot, either for work or for, so there's certain months of the year where it's hard to get, 6 or 7 people there. So if you have to come to us for a special land use and you need 6 to pass, and you only have 6 in attendance, or 7, but one has to recuse himself, it puts a lot of onus on it, and you essentially need unanimous vote to pass. So then that person either has to continue rescheduling or, hope that whoever's present all votes. So it's not really fair to the applicant that, they might have to, get all 6 people there to vote yes, if there's not 9 or 8 people there. So there's a couple things there, right? Getting 9 people to attend all meetings, which is fine, sometimes 7 and 8, you only need 5 to run a meeting, but you need 6 to pass a special land use.
Specifically, I think that's the issue, is where we have 5 people present for a quorum, but it takes 6 people to pass a special land use. That particularly would be burdensome.
So we just changed the requirement for the special land use.
Yeah, if we think that makes
Pretty
sense.
simple.
The thing
Simple
that,
majority.
yeah, the thing that I'm most sensitive to is the impact on residents and applicants. I remember we had one last year, I think Rocky brought something in, and we thought we were gonna have enough people to act on it, and we didn't, and poor Al Dyke was out sick, and Kyle had to go round him up, and Al had to come back in. And while Rocky, the applicant, waited, for us to get enough people together. And then we did have I think it was April, or March or April, had a really hard time getting enough of us all at a meeting to act on requests. So I don't think that's really responsive to residents. And that's.
Do we know where it came from, that it had to be 6? Because it doesn't seem to be the norm when you look at the other cities.
I think if you look at some of these other cities, they do separate things into easier decisions and the decisions where they really want to make sure that they have a sufficient number of people. Like, if they're going to be voting on adopting their master plan, they have like a super majority or something like that for some of those things. I think the idea is that special land uses and some of these issues can be more impactful on the community, and they want to really make sure that enough people are behind it, and that's why they have that higher standard.
So I guess Nancy, if you're saying if it probably came from whenever we created the planning commission, that
Yeah.
the city at the time, the council thought, as Jeff had said, that, these special land use and plan unit developments are much more intense projects, and they should require more unanimity to get them approved, as opposed to something that's a simple site plan, right? So I'm assuming that's the reason, because I've been in other communities where they have a higher threshold for special land uses or plan unit developments. But in those other communities, some of them, as you notice in the back here, for a site plan, they'll have a majority of those present.
Those present.
So then it'd be a majority of the
Right.
vote quorum
Right.
for those. But that's again, how much the community or the city wants to put on ensuring that as many people are on board on the planning commission for a more highly intensive project to be approved.
And
So
I,
that's the reason.
and I get that. I
Yeah.
guess it was that instead of saying it was just a majority of the people present, we said it was a super majority of the total committee. And so it does make it tough in this community to make that happen, especially in the springtime.
One other thing that I don't think it happened much here at the planning commission. I think it was an issue that happened at the zoning board of appeals once or twice, and this is something that we've had discussions about when we didn't have, the ZBA is a 5-member panel with 2 alternates. If they only had 4 people show up, then you could get into a situation, because it's a simple majority at that board, where if you have 2 votes for and 2 against, you're stuck in this thing where the motion to pass doesn't work. But then if you do a motion to deny, that also doesn't work, because you're again 2 and 2. So another reason that we may have gone with 5 for the full board, with 5 votes required to pass for the regular stuff, is that way you can't ever have.
We never had the ties.
You
We
never
ran
had
into that at
tie.
ZBA a number of years ago. It
Right.
was a tie, and that made it a no.
I also think philosophically that though the reason why it may be 5 out of the 9 is, let's say only 5 people show up and you only need 3 to pass it. Well, what if those 4 other people were against it, right, that didn't show up? And of course, that's their fault for not being there. But then really you only have 1/3 of the planning commission that really is for the project.
Right.
So that's, I think, in theory, was you want a simple majority, but at the same time, if they're not gonna come to the meeting, then, they miss out on their opportunity to cast a vote, weigh in. So I can give you my personal preference would be just to make it all 5 out of 9. You need 5 to approve something, but but you guys might want to do a simple majority of those present. And that's what Petoskey, it looked like Petoskey does. I think it was Petoskey, yeah.
Let me take the temperature of everybody.
Yeah, you should.
About, do you think we ought to consider a change to the rule, regardless of what the solution is?
I'm happy with the way it is. I think it's nice to have a larger number of people to vote. You get a variety of input. I don't think everything should be easily passed. I think it is unfortunate when people have to wait, absolutely. People want to get their projects going. I don't think the chances, I've been on the board or on this commission for 3 years and, Nancy's, I think, situation was very unique. I don't know how many times it's going to be somebody that's sitting up here. So I think I'm happy with how it is.
I think it needs a change.
You in favor of some kind of a
I
change?
think that
Okay.
system that exists punishes the taxpayer for our lack of ability to come to a meeting. And that's wrong. Taxpayers depend on us to service them, and when we don't, we punish them. Doesn't work.
Got it.
I like the majority of who's here better than that. That's not perfect, but I think that's better than what we have.
Okay. George, what do you think about a change? Is it warranted or makes sense?
I wholeheartedly agree with Emily, and then I also agree with Bob's comments. I'm sort of the mind that I think this is the right number of people who are required, and it might be a bit remiss for me to say this because I'm one who's been absent and part of the issue, and not being able to pass some of these requests. But I think this is the right number, and it involves the right number of people in the community. And the development's becoming pretty intense in our little city here. And even with, it's just a special land use. Well, these carriage houses and these accessory buildings people are building are becoming larger than their homes. And I see it and I feel it when I ride my bike around and I'm walking around town, and there are more and more trees gone and more hardscapes. And so I think this is the right number, and the rubber stamping, it can still happen with this many people, but at least there are a few more people involved in the process who can have their eyes on it. So I'd say this is the right number and no change for me.
Barry, any initial thoughts just about a change?
I mean, I agree with Emily, but also like the odds of it happening are definitely slim, that we don't have enough really, but it could happen, and it's unfortunate if it happens multiple months, then that's obviously a problem. It hasn't since I've been here, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could go either way on this.
Nancy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we should make a change of some kind.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned our ZBA, they have alternates, and the county ZBA, another board I'm on, we have alternates that sit in, and that, if we had, do you think it's enough appetite in the
Well, I
community
think
to have an alternate that could step
for
in?
the planning commission,
For the planning commission, are we limited?
I don't know that we have that capability. The Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, and Planning Enabling Act have some specific rules, and I believe they specifically say that the ZBA can have alternates. For the planning commissions, I believe they say it shall be either 7 or
That's what
9,
John.
It's 5, 7, or 9.
5,
yeah.
7, or 9.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really have anything in there that leans me to think that we could have alternates. I don't know.
Can we have proxies?
I don't
No, you
think
can't vote
so.
by, you can't vote by proxy.
Yeah, I guess.
I think the goal here should be
Yeah.
to make government more user-friendly.
Yeah.
And government as it exists is government and the people down here. And that needs to be simpler. It needs to be more user-friendly. It needs to be more workable for normal people. We put these rules and these regulations in place, sometimes with no due regard for the people who pay the taxes that keep us in operation. Because it's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know that I agree with that.
Well, I like to continue, I like having the number, a large number of people here, I like having 9, not changing like to 7 or something like that. and being on the other side of the table to present, I like having as many people here as possible.
Yeah.
Because it increases my odds at
That's
getting,
right.
Yeah, strategically, you
Yeah,
want
yeah,
more.
a lot more.
Yeah.
To get
And
them
it's
to vote.
almost
You don't
like-
want it to have to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so, on that side of the table, I would want to, I would like to see it reduced down to just 5 for special land use. You know, because just a simple majority, that makes my job on that side of the table easier. But on this side, where we're supposed to be working for the whole community and all that kind of stuff, it sort of seems like the way the system is now isn't bad. We've had some hiccups, and my apologies to you.
That's
But,
just a sign. I mean,
yeah,
that,
it
it
just
isn't
has-
about
No,
my
no,
thing at all.
understood. But this hasn't happened a whole lot in the time I've been on this committee. Usually we get the things through in a reasonable amount of time. So I'm neutral on it, but I lean towards keeping it the same.
Do we know how many times it's happened?
We haven't really kept track. I think the bill was pretty close that we did have a situation with Rocky. We had another, so maybe in the time that I've been here, I think we probably had, let's say, 3 times where this specific issue, where we didn't have 6 people present to be able to do that. We've also had, I would say 3 or 4 times where we just didn't have a quorum of people to be able to come to a meeting. We had to cancel a meeting. So, and I think that's kind of in the same realm of issue there.
I think the flip side of this is if we decide we still want the super majority, I don't know if that's the right term. Then we have to pay better attention to attendance. And I'm not throwing any stones at specific people, but I think if we're going to do that and say we have to have at least 6, and it's never to the whoever's presenting to their advantage to have to be unanimous. That's never, like we were just saying.
Yeah, I would.
Then I think we have to balance that with them. What is the standard for making it to the meetings? I think those things have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, the risk is in any given meeting, you might have 1 or 2 people who know that they can't attend and, have checked in. And then somebody gets sick that day.
That's
and,
right.
Can't.
That happens. Yeah, it
That's part of
happens.
small town community.
Yeah,
It just happens.
Yeah.
So you go, oh, sorry, but this happened.
I could go either way. I see both sides and sensitive to both. I'm thinking most about being of service to residents and applicants. On the other hand, I have seen us adapt to the challenge, and everybody's been nice enough to come to a special meeting as quickly as possible to get enough people to take action. And I guess if we kept it the same, we would probably have to say to ourselves, okay, then we gotta be on tap to come to a special meeting as soon as that makes sense.
What's the number? Our numbers of special land uses have been going down, wasn't it? I mean, when your drafts there just a little bit ago. Just a point of the case, yeah.
Yeah, this orange line.
And,
Yeah,
I guess the
hasn't-
other
yeah.
part of this too is
Pretty
we're
constant.
looking at making some things in the zoning code by right,
Mhm.
possibly, and getting rid of some of the
Correct.
special, I mean, that's
good
another
point. We are-
option.
that's
So
true.
that if we're only asking for special land use when it's really a big deal, if you will,
Yeah.
then maybe the supermajority makes more
And
sense.
one of the things that we have been talking about, maybe this is what you're going to say, is that, well, this will be part of your report. But there is another layer that can be.
Right,
can
a
handle some
committee,
of this
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So then
That's a
maybe
good point.
the big special land uses, whatever, would need the supermajority, but the more routine ones would not.
Yeah.
If I could add one more thought, just to help muddy the waters. I also think it's important to note that when you grant a special land use, that runs in perpetuity with that property forever. It's not with just that person or just that business. That special land use stays with that property in forever. So, and I think that because of that, it should be, we should make sure that, I could see it coming down to 5. But I don't think below that would be, like a simple majority of the members present would not be appropriate for special.
I think a good example of that is the Lake Street and Hoyt, Lake and Hoyt, the short-term rental on that corner. That they had a special land use, they can't use it as a short-term rental on Lake Street. And that's runs forever
There's-
with the land.
Yeah, that's a good example. On the corner of Lake and Hoyt, we did the special use. We created that so they could have two separate dwellings and be able to rent them out. But it came with the caveat that it could not be short-term rented. I think another example is right here on the corner of Judd and Main. Back in the 1980s, they were granted a special land use to operate as a bed and breakfast.
The veranda.
The veranda, right, and I think for a while, maybe they haven't been, but I think it is potentially up for sale, and interest in operating a bed and breakfast has been brought back up, and because we gave them permission in the 80s, they still have permission now.
And right across the street from that, there used to be an
That's for sale.
Italian restaurant for a
Right.
while. And that got a special land use permit too, and so someone could come back and put that there if they wished, correct?
So what I'm hearing is we're saying, the things that we're gonna have for special land use, the stakes are high. It is, very important to the community. And we ought to have more people involved, and maybe the time is not right to make a change to the current.
But to put an emphasis on attendance.
Or, and if we can't get enough people, we gotta come back for special meetings pretty fast to serve the residents. Agreed. Okay. So it sounds like where we're coming down is not recommending a change at this time. Anybody have any final thoughts on that, Bob? No. All right. I don't think we need a motion on that, no, it's just an action we're not gonna
Unless
take.
someone wants to make a motion. But it doesn't have to be.
All right, then let's just say we're not gonna take any action on that idea. Thanks for taking us through that, that was great. All right, next thing on the agenda. I've lost the agenda. Hold on.
Zoning code.
Update.
Zoning code update, good, that's a good one. The zoning code review subcommittee has now met 2 times. And it's been Emily, Mark, Rick, and I, Jeff, Victor, and John Icoangeli. We've agreed that we're gonna meet every other Thursday for a couple hours, just in a work session. And John Icoangeli really cut through a lot of stuff for us, and he laid out that there are 3 key things, big decisions that this committee needs to make, and then all of us later. And that is, what the zoning districts are gonna look like, how they're gonna be organized, and that kind of a thing. And then the amount of by right, administrative, and PC approval. So just the thing we were talking about with special land use, we all get a chance to revisit that as to what requires a special land use, or what could be approved by Jeff administratively, or there's a middle ground that we're discovering that could be a kind of a subcommittee thing working with Jeff. So that's a big decision we'll all have to make. And then permitted uses. So that those 2 things mesh with the zoning districts and about, what's allowed in each one. And those things work together to create the effect that we're looking for. And what we've done so far is reviewed the residential zoning districts. Starting with AR, we had quite a interesting and long discussion about the AR district, which is a small one, and about agriculture and what uses might be permitted there. And then we had a great talk today about all the residential zoning districts, which is the real meat of our city, as we learned, and everything else. And just as a preview, we think it looks very promising to reduce the number of residential zoning districts quite a lot. We don't know what that answer is going to be yet, and but in terms of administrative and the way that the code could fit together, it looks like we could simplify pretty radically the residential side. Now, we may change our mind when we get into permitted uses and how all that works out, and don't hold us to that. But so we've had a couple of real good discussions, and we're when we get to a point where it's time to preview some of this stuff, My thought is to run it by the planning commission first, and, then if we decide to have some type of a public preview, you can critique it and help us, and then the whole commission will get to weigh in on some of the big decisions, of course. So people, part of the subcommittee, can you think of anything else?
Just that one of our guide posts in this whole thing is the master plan. What the master plan says, what some of our goals are, making sure that we're in lockstep with that as much as possible, which is critical. We have to do that. So we talk about that every day. Make sure we're pretty consistent with the master plan.
We had a lot of interest from other planning commission members in participating in the committee. And I think it was the previous meeting, we discussed how to rotate through. And I think one of the things we came up with was that when we're on a certain topic, we should keep the same members there to continue that discussion until that topic is kind of complete. But then when we switch to another topic, have that opportunity to rotate through and bring in some other members that are interested in participating.
Great, thank you, Jim.
Some examples of topics could be the process, for how we deal with, zoning appeals or applications. We have, for example, green standards, you got stormwater use, environmental, and I know, so some people lean heavily more to that stuff. So I think, when there's an interest that comes up for specific discussions, you should make yourself known, so that way we can rotate those out. So we don't overexhaust also those current board members. It's a lot of work. We do a lot of those 2 hours. Well, we have.
So, all right, thanks for the chance to update you on that. And then we are going to move into member comments. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add?
I was also supposed to update about the
Yes,
kickoff meeting tomorrow.
you were,
Yeah.
yes.
I'll do that really quick. So we are having a kickoff meeting with the MEDC because the MEDC has granted us a grant to do our zoning code update. So council agreed to that grant. We have contracted with Beckett and Rader, of course, they're a consultant, and they gave an estimate of how much it's going to cost to do the zoning code update. And that the grant covers 75% of that cost. So it's a really big thing for us because it's like a $30,000+ job here with the consultant. So, getting about $25,000 to update zoning code, something that we were going to do regardless. It's great for us. So what we're doing is we're having a kickoff meeting with MEDC, this Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They're the one giving the grant because of our involvement in the RRC. And so we have John Michelangeli, Bill Mulder, Jeff, and I are just going to have a kickoff meeting. And at certain milestones, they pay us. So that's more of an administrative thing. But, signing a contract with a consultant and having this kickoff meeting gets us our first 25%. Then at the end, providing a final zoning code document gets us our last bit of money, and there's steps in between there. So, that's happening tomorrow, and then we'll officially be in the zoning code mode for MEDC, even though we've been at it.
Yeah, so that's a real victory, $25,000 to pay for something we were already going to pay for. So and that came by way of the RRC process, the redevelopment ready community process. So that was the benefit of doing that.
And that was one of the main, it's two benefits we always said about the RC was one is help us clean up and make our processes more efficient. Another one was it makes us available to grant money. And we're seeing benefits both of those now.
Fantastic. And then how about Monday night?
Oh, yeah, that's
Oh,
Monday.
Bill, you're a moderator, aren't you?
Yes, I want to remind everybody that we have an opportunity to attend a special meeting Monday night. It's a joint meeting of City Council, Planning Commission, DDA, and the Chamber, a non-government entity. And we're going to be talking about economic development. Nancy mentioned a healthy city and the balance between residential and commercial, for instance. So that could be something that we could talk about.
And it's really, good because economic development is one of those topics that doesn't go really in the zoning code well. So we have a lot of goals in the master plan, and some you can work on with the zoning code. Other goals, like the zoning code, is not going to address them really. I mean, it can to a certain extent about the permitting process et cetera, but there's a lot more about economic development that goes beyond the zoning code. So it's a good opportunity to get the different minds of the different boards together just to have a discussion. We're calling it a meeting for Open Meeting Act purposes, but it's really going to be more of a discussion and a forum. Public will be there, pizza will be there, some snacks. Bill will moderate. A lot of the discussion is going to be talking about our economic development goals and how we achieve them. And if there's other goals we want to explore, and then the other topic will be how do we balance the commercial needs for both our visitors, our residents, and our businesses as well. So trying to balance those different needs. So it'll be hopefully a good discussion, at least to share ideas, and then we can bring it back to the planning commission for further talk.
And it's at Holy Child.
Holy Childhood Community Center at 6 p.m.
With pizza,
Monday, the 22nd.
and bring your friends and neighbors are welcome. Anybody you think that would add value?
What time is that joint meeting?
6 p.m.
That's tomorrow night.
No, Monday night.
Monday night.
22nd.
Okay, what time is the meeting tomorrow night?
Oh, tomorrow,
Oh, that's 10 a.m. That's like a,
That's, yeah,
Yes, tomorrow day.
yeah.
tomorrow during the day.
That's just, yeah.
Our kickoff meeting.
You sure can come.
You'd be welcome.
You can come and watch.
You can watch us.
Great, okay. Anyone have anything else for tonight? All right, thanks, everybody. Good discussion. This meeting's adjourned.